So within my time playing TF2, I've learnt that most players are pretty stubborn when it comes to using the same loadouts and weapons over and over again. And whilst I think this is probably the normal thing to do, for content creation reasons I tend to use most weapons pretty evenly. There do exist, however, a large subsection of weapons that I've desperately tried to use on a regular basis, but I just can't really seem to get into for one reason or another. So I picked 4 of the most interesting ones, and I'm going to be presenting them to you in this video today. If you'd like to see like-minded content like this in the future, or if you'd like to see the reverse and see me cover weapons that I love to use but I assume most people have trouble with, please consider subscribing and letting me know down below. And with that all being said, why don't we just start this video with the weapon that inspired me to make it to begin with. Summed up in one word, the Big Earner is just cool. The Big Earner is a cool guy and he makes you feel cool when you hang around him because he gets you into cool places and does cool things. And I think that's why most people like using the Big Earner. It just feels cool to use. Ask any Big Earner why they use this weapon and the answer is always something to do with the chain stabs. Going for a 3-man chain stab has never been easier than with a weapon like the Big Earner, and it's just cool. I don't have any other words to describe it. Now I find all this funny because the main reason people tend to use the Big Earner is actually contrary to its initial design philosophy. You see, the Big Earner was initially designed as an escape tool, giving you an extra 30% cloak on kill and the speed boost to help you escape. And on paper you'd think using this to go back in and get another kill would be counterintuitive, but it actually works out fine in practice. So, with all this cool stuff being said, why do I struggle to use this weapon? Well, I think this is going to be a rare case on this list, because I think you know exactly why I struggle to use this thing. Having 25 less health sucks. Every time I use this weapon, I feel like I am targeted by the tryhard demo men, and then the tryhard soldiers, and then the tryhard scouts, and then the tryhard demo men again. Having 100 health is such an important damage threshold for TF2 that it would take me an entire video to explain why. But just note that all of these classes can one-shot you if you have just 100 health, and as a spy, you're going to be running into these guys a lot. So in summary, the Big Earner is a cool guy, and just like all cool guys, he does drugs, and therefore that can make him quite hard to be around. The Big Earner is still a weapon that I desperately want to learn to use properly, however, it just seems like it's a big time investment, and I don't really have that right now. Alright, let's talk about the thumbnail weapon. So the Jag is widely considered to just be the all-purpose best wrench of the engineer's arsenal. You'll find very few people who disagree with that, as, well, it's just fact. So the Jag's upsides are that it has a 15% faster firing speed and a 30% boost in construction speed when hitting your sentry. And this comes at the cost of less damage towards players, less damage towards buildings, and a slower repair rate. The Jag's philosophy is that it is an insanely powerful construction tool, yet it fails in the kind of long-term sustainability department, but in reality it kind of just excels in all, and this can make using any other wrench feel quite stressful and frustrating at times, purely because it's not the Jag. So, much like with the Big Earner, this weapon truly seems perfect on paper. However... Smell again, mommy! Okay, so I promise that not every weapon on this list will be ruined by just one stat for me. However, the first 2 are, and the Jag is definitely the biggest offender of this. Simply put, I cannot deal with spies when I have to hit a sapper 3 times in order to remove it. The sapper technique, as we all know it, just simply does not work for me whenever I am using the Jag. Maybe this thing's whole philosophy of getting your buildings up quickly yet failing in the long-term sustainability does work in practice, but only when it comes to spies and nothing else. I wonder if this is an issue other people have as well. I mean, I'm not the best engineer. Engineer is my second most played class, and he's probably the class I have the second most fun with. But when it comes to dealing with spies specifically, I crumble whenever this thing is in my hand, and therefore I think that makes it a pretty valid weapon to add to this list. Now I'm going to assume some of you are completely baffled as to why I would ever want to learn to use the lock and load to begin with. Yes, after all these years and all these changes that this weapon has gone through, it is still widely hated and I do not really understand why. The old lock and load was a rightfully hated weapon, yet the modern day version is literally just so much nothing that I do not understand why people still hate it. And now from me saying that, you might have a couple questions including why do you want to get into this weapon if it is so nothing, and why are you struggling to get into this weapon if it is so nothing, and to that I say, let me finish. So I want to get into this weapon just because it feels fun to use. Getting a kill with this thing feels really nice. It feels smooth in a way that no other grenade launcher does, and I think smooth is the right word. And now when it comes to me struggling to use this weapon, I don't really think there's one specific reason or another. I think it's just a general collective reasonings of the weapon's design. I don't think it has something to do with the lack of rollers. I think I'm perfectly fine with that. I think instead, it probably has something to do with the faster projectile speed. Just like with the Jag is with sappers, the lock and load requires a whole different mentality to what you might normally be used to with something like the grenade launcher. And so in order to use this thing effectively, you have to really commit to learning to use this thing. And in doing so, you're guaranteeing putting in loads of effort for very little results. So in short, everybody hates the lock and load. Everybody hates fighting against it, and I hate using it. But I really like the idea of using it, if that makes any sense at all. And that alone is enough motivation for me to... Actually, scratch that, this weapon sucks. It's the lack of a passive. Okay, so when I play Soldier, I am what I like to refer to as a banner guy, as in I only ever use the banners when I play Soldier and I use no other secondaries, except for Shotgun Soft, which I'm making a video on, but we'll get to that later. So, whenever I play Soldier, I'm always using one of the 3 banners, and the buff banner is the one I struggle to use the most, purely because it doesn't have a passive. Now, if you ask 50 different Soldier players whether this thing needs a passive or not, you will get 50 different answers. However, I'm in the broad camp that agrees that this thing does need a passive. Mini crits are simply nowhere near as strong as what the other banners can offer for your team, and I am a firm believer that the buff banner is the weakest of Soldier's banners. Now before you go charging into the comments telling me about how I'm wrong, you must remember that this is purely my opinion and you are allowed to disagree. I just do not see a universe in which the buff banner's 8 seconds worth of mini crits is stronger than the Conch's 8 seconds worth of speed boost, healing up to 35% of the damage you've dealt back, and a passive health regeneration, or the buff banner giving you 8 seconds of a 35% damage resistance to everything, a 50% damage resistance from sentries, and a passive extra 20 health. Like seriously, mini crits don't come anywhere near close to those powers. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not the lack of the banner's ability that kills this weapon for me, it's the lack of a passive. The passives that the other banners offer are just amazing, and I really do think the buff banner should have one as well. Lots of people have thrown around lots of different ideas for what this passive could be, but I personally think it should allow you to capture objectives faster, a bit like how a scout can. This of course shouldn't stack with the pain train, because nothing should, and that weapon sucks, and it should remain that way. But I really do like the idea of the buff banner, and it does have its moments, like in, for example, Man vs Machine, where it really doesn't need a passive there. But when it comes to player versus player settings for TF2, I desperately think the buff banner needs a passive, and I don't think that's too big of an ask. And I reckon that will do it there for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If this video seems a bit random or a bit slow, it's because I'm only just recovering from being very ill for a very long time. So, I'm sorry if this video didn't quite live up to your expectations. But expect regular videos to return pretty soon. Okay, well, that's all I really have to add. Thank you very much everyone for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you later down the sunny road.